Originally defined as the mirror image of literacy, with the addition of quantitative thinking, numeracy presents as a critical element within education. In recent times, an alternate view has taken place, and numeracy is viewed with a much wider lens. Numeracy is largely viewed now as an individual's capacity to identify and understand the role of mathematics within the world, to assist in judgments, and to engage citizens within mathematics to constructively critique life itself. The physical education discipline presents numerous barriers to teaching mathematical-based numeracy. These include the absence of technology, workbooks, and other materials. However, areas including spatial awareness, estimating distance, angles, vectors, and chance are all relevant in the discipline. For instance, students develop numeracy capabilities when calculating, estimating, and measuring information to assist in areas of skill performance and physical navigation. The perspective of pre-service teachers sheds light into the possible implications of numeracy inadequate programs offered at a tertiary level. Only 44% of pre-service teachers believe there were numerical constraints required outside of the mathematical discipline. This data presents as a concern towards educational programs and may identify a deficiency within pre-service education programs. This research presents as a concern towards educational programs, and furthermore, it may be of importance for educational programs to increase the standard of numeracy held within, as a clear discrepancy in numerical understanding is held by pre-service teachers. A number of PE areas have been identified as numerically rich. Understanding geometric properties, a sub-element which describes how a student becomes increasingly able to identify the attributes of shapes and objects and how they can be combined or transformed. Being able to use spatial awareness and reasoning to assist these geometric properties to solve problems is important in a range of tasks. For example, in health and PE, students are required to understand angles in order to critique and improve movement sequences. They use spatial reasoning in movement activities, such as manipulating space and their relationship to other players in this space when playing games. Positioning and locating is another element, which describes how a student becomes increasingly able to recognize the attributes of position and location. This sub-element is important to health and PE as it assists with the development of spatial reasoning, coordination, and kinesthetic awareness in movement activities and in developing concepts and strategies for individuals and team sports, fitness or recreational pursuits. Interpreting and representing data. This sub-element describes how a student becomes increasingly able to recognize and use visual numerical displays to describe data. Making sense of data is vital to analyzing health and PE. Students use data to develop displays to propose explanations for patterns, relationships, and trends, to predict outcomes, and to propose future action. They interpret statistical displays and think critically about the claims made by others. The implementation of numeracy-heavy lessons should be of interest to students. It will expose them to experiences they have not had before, and all data will be collected from observational and questioning methods. The current issue is an important one for me, as I was exposed to such issues throughout my latest placement opportunity. Throughout this experience, it was evident that the older teachers within the discipline were unaware of the numerical opportunities embedded within this subject. Throughout my tertiary education, it has become increasingly evident how important numeracy is across a wide range of disciplines, changing my perception of numeracy being only a maths-based skill. As a whole, I want to expose students to real-life situations that draw upon numerical understanding. For instance, a student unable to control the ball release when striking the ball in tennis will be able to recognize the angle and power of their strike and make adjustments according to this feedback. The student may quickly understand this feedback, or if needed, the teacher can assist outlining such theory. Furthermore, I would like to foster higher order thinking students to be able to recognize the link between theory and practice, understanding concepts and putting them into action. It is common within a basketball game for students to hunt the ball, and in this situation, students who can recognize space, angles, and time are able to escape this cluster of students and generate effective possessions through spatial awareness and positioning. Due to the constant emphasis on numeracy within this program, I don't believe it is an issue as per se for my teaching practice. I believe the challenge lies within the current educational sector and the prejudgments current teachers hold in regards to numeracy in PE. It is important to devise a plan when approaching all classes. The following table outlines 3 strategies with links to curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment. This has been examined and identified as contextualising numeracy, specifically within physical education. Strategy 1 looks at incorporating ICT into the unit to support numeracy. This strategy links to the health and physical education curriculum by exposing students to various technology, including video, GPS, and heart rate monitors. Such exposure has been shown to enhance student understanding of time, space, geometry, and kinetics. The health PE discipline is a hard one to assess. However, throughout this unit, it is proposed that students will be self-assessed and assessed through observation. A rubric will be devised identifying various parameters, including spatial awareness and time, which linking such theory to their own personal performance. Strategy 2 proposes the idea to heavily pre-plan numeracy within each lesson. This initiative is linked to the same curriculum model, which is heavily focused on incorporating movement, analysing strategies, and identifying space, geometry, and time. Intentional planning of numeracy within this model allows a focus for each lesson. This may be the implementation of biomechanical mechanisms behind a basketball shot. Explicitly linking theory and practice has been shown to promote deep learning. Through student engagement and observation, reports will be generated to evaluate the impact of such learning and planning on the students. Key educational theorist John Haidy has endorsed this. Strategy 3 incorporates class discussion throughout each lesson and can be linked into the planning aspect of this action plan. Pre-planning questions to facilitate discussion has been identified as a critical element. John Haidy has also endorsed this through his high-impact teaching strategies. It is expected that such discussions should allow students to link theory with practice, possibly a way of scaffolding information to students. Similar to the first strategy, self-assessment will be undertaken to determine students' comprehension on numeracy. Diagnostic self-assessment data is one form of data that will be collected to begin the unit. An exemplar has been created and demonstrated here, which identifies the ability to interpret information generated from such methods. This assessment is in the form of a survey/questionnaire and will be based off the student's self-perceived rating. Formative feedback and observation and questioning is another key element to student learning outcomes. An option of formative feedback may be an observational formative assessment in the form of semi-structured questions and interviews. When planned effectively, this can address the key areas of numeracy within a unit, such as spatial awareness, as indicated in the following table. These are possible results from a high-end student and low-end students, respectively. Lastly, summative observation and self-assessment are the forms of data that will be collected last. These will be completed through field notes, written records, rubrics, and questionnaires. As outlined in the previous tables, students are aware of the key elements assessed throughout this unit. Both formative and diagnostic methods will be undertaken to cross-reference the teacher's assessment with each student's self-assessment. This is not only valuable for students, however, it also presents as a good indicator of teaching instruction delivered across the unit. The data presents some important findings. The student self-assessment scores showed a strong positive correlation across the unit. Many students self-reported a high spatial awareness from the start of the unit and it significantly increased towards the back end of the unit when the summative assessment task was taking place. This could be attributed to various planning, exposure to new experiences, and continual formative feedback. The data presented confirmed the findings of Goose and Dole, whom suggested that numeracy is the most effective when it is displayed within multiple contexts, assisting their understanding to make critical judgments and reason. This solidified the position of Steen, who suggested students required multiple exposure with tasks that demand mathematical skills in numerous contexts. The link between theory and practice is bridged with such explicit reference to numeracy. The well-known Jean Piaget suggested a strong link between motor and cognitive processes, both of which are heavily active in physical education. Observation, discussion, and student articulation are all aspects which may serve as feedback for the teacher. Generally speaking, the more engaged students are within the unit, the greater the delivery of instructions and complexity of task development. I'm a believer that students will generate the greatest learning outcomes in an environment that they are comfortable with and enjoy being part of. Furthermore, the self-assessment of students, as described earlier, may serve as a good indication of student learning and engagement. A couple of ethical issues may arise throughout this unit. These areas include informed consent, confidentiality, and cultural sensitivity, as well as avoiding doing harm and the security of data. Students have the right for their information to be personal and not disclosed to others. Therefore, it is vital throughout this unit that all feedback, discussion, and observation are within the ethical guidelines. There are multiple areas which are critical to the action plan's success. Initially, planning lessons that embed numeracy are critical. Approaching a lesson with a heavy numeracy focus allows for gradual exposure to numerical elements across the unit. Some students may struggle with grasping such concepts, suggesting an important role to continual exposure, a high-impact teaching strategy. Facilitating class discussion is also critical, allowing students to articulate the link between numeracy and sport. Articulation of answers has been shown to enrich learning and foster learning outcomes. Lastly, I believe it is important to create interesting and engaging lessons. Students very rarely utilize ICT within physical education, so implementing such measures may increase the motivation and participation across the board. This allows students who are not generally engaged to use their interests, possibly technology and maths, to generate the connection between theory and practice within this discipline. As a physical education pre-service teacher, it was important to examine the models of teaching and connect relevant numerical literature towards such practices. The TGFU model, Teaching Games for Understanding, proposes the notion that learning is the most effective when it's self-discovered, suggesting that physical education lessons should be less structured with more time allowed for self-discovery. When critiqued effectively, it is evident that this model could provide students with the ability to interpret the space surrounding them, promoting areas of spatial awareness, reasoning, geometry, arithmetic, and chance. My teaching philosophy is constantly evolving, and the TGFU model is one I incorporate heavily within my practice. However, I also began to understand the importance of CPEP, sports educational programs, within this discipline, particularly for altering the point of view for numerical understanding. Webb, Pearson, and Forrest examined the CPEP model, suggesting that the model allows for the development of social and cognitive skills within the discipline. One of the key elements to this unit is allocation of specific roles such as a coach, referee, umpire, game analyzer, and data collector. When addressed correctly, cognitive areas including communication, tactics, technique, and decision-making are all addressed. The CPEP model was supported by Thornton and Hogan, whom suggested that for students applying numeracy to real-world contexts, significant strides needed to be made outside of the mathematical discipline to allow for mathematics exposure in real-world contexts. The CPEP model allows for such experience to take place not only for students participating in the game, but also in the roles of umpiring, match analysis, and through the collection of data. This model is one I will definitely aim to introduce within my teaching practice. This action plan allows me to link such models and add numerical elements to enrich the learning experience. The action plan further solidifies my goals and expectations as a teacher. I don't believe in being that teacher that does what they have to do and that's it. I want to challenge my students, test them, get them thinking critically, analysing, and questioning. I want my classroom, whether that be indoors or out, to be one of continual learning, evolution, and growth. Incorporating areas of numeracy within this discipline, along with ICT, presents as a great opportunity to foster the critical thinking and experiences of students. I believe such teaching will improve student learning outcomes, serving as a means for effective assessment and lifelong decision makers. Student questioning, continual feedback, and discussion are all key elements which will aid my teaching practice. It is vital to continually review such practices and recognise the impact it is having on students, whether that be positive or negative. The implementation of numeracy within health PE discipline is one that takes effort and planning. The action plan generated promotes three key strategies: planning in advance, implementation of ICT, and facilitating discussion to link numerical theory with practice. Planning lessons that incorporate space, time, geometry, angles, and arithmetic are vital for successful learners. Students regularly learn about space and measurement in maths. However, not often do they have the opportunity to implement that in practice. Incorporating those key areas within PE lessons is a critical opportunity to make this a practical link. Visualization of numeracy may be made possible through ICT, allowing students to analyse movement data, heart rate graphs, and match play. Lastly, concluding lessons with strategic questioning may also serve as a vital element to numeracy within the curriculum. Allowing students to articulate their responses may embed a deeper learning experience than simply the experience itself. Questioning, feedback, and discussion are all highly valued during lessons and after the lesson has been completed. To make sure the information delivered is effective, it is critical to provide an environment which is inclusive, reasonable, and engaging to continually foster learning outcomes.